So get started. So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. I don't know where to look because there's both in person and not. Tonight we will meet author Allan Dines, who will talk about his book Front Row Center: How I Met Everyone. My name is Matt Schumann, and I am on the programming team here at Cary Library. Before we begin, I just want to take a moment to thank the Cary Library Foundation. Their support enables us to bring programs like tonight's event to you. This program is being recorded and will, I better start recording. Oh, it is recording. Okay, great. It's a lot to juggle with hybrid. There's so much to pay attention to. This program is being recorded and will be posted to the library's YouTube channel. And we will present tonight's program in a hybrid format, as I've said 1,000 times. For those attending in person, there will be time for questions as the program ends. Now I'd like to introduce our speaker. Allan Dines is a Boston-based photographer who documents the history and lives of those in his community. As having been part of the Boston scene for the last 23 years, Allan has amassed a treasure trove of original works of Boston and its activities, from political events to timeless moments in art, culture, and history. So now please join me in welcoming Allan Dines.
Matt, thank you so much. I really appreciate the introduction, but I will correct you on one thing. As of last week, I'm now 30 years in the field. That's a little bit earlier, but I want credit for all those years. Good evening. Thank you for coming on Zoom and also here at the library. Thank you to the library for having me here. Before we get started, I want to start with my disclaimer. My memory stinks, but I do have a second disclaimer. My memory stinks. That's really not true, but if you look behind, if you look at the image that you're seeing right now, that's about 150 to 200 passes of the more than 300 passes that I have in my collection. Over the last 30 years, I've done probably about 2,500 or more shoots in Boston, and I've shot over 500,000 images, which is amazing to me, just the number of times firing a camera and looking through the lens and picking a shot. If you do photography, that's a lot of shooting. I don't want to start at the very beginning, how I got the camera and all that. That's all in the book. I really want to get into some of these celebrity photos. But what I will say is my first break came, I was an amateur, and I saw that there was an event called the Eyeball happening at the Park Plaza Hotel in Boston, which was a fundraiser for a newspaper woman, Norma Nathan, who had died. And I talked my way into it. I had no idea that you couldn't just talk your way into things. I had a background in sales, and I wasn't a kid. I was 30 years old when I actually picked up the camera. Talked my way into it, and I ended up with a shot of Norma Nathan, and was approached by a woman from the Jewish Advocate and said, if that's a good shot, I would love to use it. And that's basically the way my career started. Within 3 months, the Jewish Advocate was calling me on a regular basis, not as a staff photographer, but as a freelance photographer. And they'd give me assignments. I was shooting the front page and shot it for about a year. But within the first 3 weeks of working with them, these were some of the shots that I took. It was in 1992, and this is when George H.W. Bush was running for re-election, and Bill Clinton was coming to Boston. But prior to his coming to Boston, Hillary came in. I do like this shot of her. The lighting was just wonderful. This was a press event. And then here you are with Bill Clinton. He came in 2 weeks later. This was a big rally held at Faneuil Hall, and you'll notice in the photo, Paul Tsong is by Bill Clinton's left elbow, right there, and State Rep Joe Kennedy, and the mayor at the time, Ray Flynn. And to keep that going, within 2 weeks after that, I had an experience that I never thought I would have in my life. I ended up with my first pass for the Jewish Advocate to be on site when Air Force One came into Logan. And that was an incredible experience. Just the plane itself, to be on the tarmac when that giant 747 was taxiing, was just wonderful. And then the other thing that was really great about the Jewish Advocate, they were really lenient with me and they would allow me to choose things that I wanted to see that weren't necessarily going to be front page, but they also had a gossip column. And if I found something that I was interested in, I would ask the managing editor and he'd say, sure, as long as you provide us with the photo, and they weren't paying for it. And I did this a lot. And here are a couple of things that I shot. This was the final time that Cheers, the cast of Cheers came to Boston. They actually did shooting at the Bull and Finch pub. And they did use Boston police and Boston firemen in the shooting of the scenes. You can see up in the window is Kelsey Grammer, and he is tethered and held in place, but it didn't stop him from grabbing the wall with his hand really hard behind him as well. And then down on the street, you can see on the left here is John Ratzenberger, Cliff Clavin, and Ted Danson. Now, Ted's very interesting because he also was a big supporter of a group called the Wellness Community that was here for many years, which was founded by a very dear friend of Gilda Radner after she died. And Ted was a regular at that. So I got to meet him a few more times over the years. Wonderful, wonderful guy and very funny. Another real one that excited me was a North Shore Music Theater. I was asked by the gossip columnist, Barbara Brilliant, at the Jewish Advocate. And this is Joan Rivers. Now, I do want to tell you, these images, if you know photography, these images go back to '92. And they were sandwiched together in my filing cabinets through hot and cold, and they've deteriorated, as has my memory. And it took a lot of editing and a lot of time to get some of these images where the film is literally falling off, the emulsion is falling off the film. So some of these I was very happy to save. This is one of my favorite. This woman was really terrific. And I was very lucky and spent many hours photographing her in different events and venues, and had the great fortune of sitting in her kitchen at her home in Cambridge, which is now part of the Smithsonian, of her as her exhibit. And then probably the biggest break that I got using the Jewish Advocate as my in to many things was the House of Blues. The original House of Blues was opening in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And I really wanted to be at this. It was in the press. Everybody was talking about it. And I spoke to my editor, and he said, if you can get yourself in, you're all good. And I did. And I was there the second night. There were two openings. It was November 22nd and 23rd. I was on the 23rd. This is one of my favorite photos. This is Donald Duck Dunn and Steve Cropper, who were in the fabulous musicians, but also they were in the movie The Blues Brothers, which is where this whole idea and concept started with Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi. And here is Dan. Obviously, Belushi was not around anymore. And if you look in the back here, that's Matt Guitar Murphy, who was also in the original movie. Another thing that I did at the time was I really enjoyed music, and also with the House of Blues, I really wanted to be there again, and I wanted to shoot there. And it wasn't long before that happened, but I'll get back to that. That was in November, and then the following summer in June, maybe July, was the WZLX Classic Bean at the Hatch Shell. I got the job of shooting this concert and providing a book of images to them. And it's the first time that I had a true all access pass. This meant that I could go anywhere without being stopped. And I took full advantage of it. I was all over the inside of the Hatch Shell, and I was on the lawn and photographing people. But I got to do something that I had never done before. And that was to walk to the very front of the stage and photograph an audience. I had never been in front of that many people in my life. It was exciting and terrifying all at the same time. And when I got up there, people waved at me. So I waved back. And when I waved back, they waved more. Then I waved again, and then they started yelling. So I picked up the camera and I started shooting. And as Matt from the library pointed out when he saw this photo earlier, he asked what year it was. I said, early 90s. And he said, yeah, there's still some mullets in the crowd. So one of the things that really excited me about being at this event was the House of Blues had their House of House of Blues All-Stars there as one of the bands. And I will get back to them in a second, because House of Blues played a big role in my early career. But before the night was over, the big acts for the day were Roger McGuinn, but also the band, not the band, but the band. And I made my way to the stage again, and to the left here, you see Jim Weider. To the right on drums, you see the original drummer, Levon Helm, and Rick Danko throwing a stare at me, which basically said, "I want you to leave the stage." And I realized that I had pushed it a little bit too far that time, and I did leave the stage. But what I wanted to say was, earlier in the evening, after the House of Blues All-Stars played, I was approached by a gentleman that worked for the House of Blues, and he said, "Would you be willing to, send me some photos?" Now, I was 32 at the time, and I knew if I sent them photos, that would be the end of it. They'd have them, they put them away. And I said, "I'd love to share the photos, but I want to bring them to you in Cambridge." He said, "Great." So within a few days of the show, because I needed to get photos ready for the radio station, I also had photos for the House of Blues and went over there. And I guess they were impressed. I talked about this in the book because I went in there on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, and that Saturday I was shooting this event. They hired me pretty much on the spot. This was the Stevie Ray Vaughan tribute, and it started my career with the House of Blues. I worked with the house for over 3.5 years, and still I'm in touch with many of the people from there. We have a group online, and it's a tight-knit group. So aside from all the blues, that was just amazing at the House of Blues, and it really was. I mean, the majority of the music there was blues. It was true to the mission. But they also had acts just that raised the roof, basically. They had Clarence Clemens of the E Street Band, Bruce Springsteen's band, known as the Big Man, put on a phenomenal show at the House of Blues. And when you had a good show at the House of Blues, you knew it was good because the floorboards would shake from the people moving up and down. It was a second floor, and when you filled it up, it literally shook. It was awesome. It was really fun. This was another super group that played there. This is the band Boston. They had so much equipment, and you had 6 guys on stage with all that equipment, trucks outside providing more power for them. There was no room on the stage. You actually had to build the stage out just for the band to fit. And you have 2 of the original members here. You have Brad Delp all the way to the left here, who unfortunately committed suicide a few years ago, and Tom Scholl's the founding member. But I was very pleased to pull Brad aside and get this shot of him. It was a really relaxed moment. We shot probably about half a dozen photos, but this one he just kind of blanked down, and I really enjoyed it. Speaking about another wonderful set of musicians, Chris Layton here. Everything is left to right. So Chris Layton is from Double Trouble, Stevie Ray Vaughan's band. He was an original member of a 3-person band. Beside him is Eric Burden from the Animals, fabulous, big name in music. Little Milton, rock and roll legend, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And to the right is Robbie Krieger of The Doors. I mean, this guy played with Jim Morrison. I never thought that I would ever know anybody that had a connection to Jim Morrison. So I thought that was a really fun evening. And then another night, Zach Starkey, Ringo Starr's son, was playing, and the Who were in town, probably at the Garden. And we were fortunate enough to have John Entwistle show up. And this is at the soundboard. And just to be in the same room with somebody from the Who, I grew up listening to these guys. I mean, I loved their music. So I was really thrilled about these. The R&B, great Lou Rawls. He was really fun. He was really fun in whatever we wanted to shoot. They never said no. I really had a good connection with people at the House of Blues. They knew that I was there to do something good for them, and I never let anybody look bad. You won't find a bad shot of somebody coming off of my lens. I would never let it go out. Here you have Al Uncer, the race car driver, and Brad Whitford from Aerosmith. And this was a shot that was specifically for the newspapers. Between the House of Blues, I also shot for the Hard Rock. And between those two, I fed photos to the Globe and the Herald on a regular basis. Harold if it was a little more, little wilder, and Globe if it was more conservative. But the one thing that was really cool about it is, as long as I had a shot in either one of those papers, within a day or two, I was guaranteed about $750 worth of work. And it happened year after year after year. I'm thrilled that the papers were around to help me out like that. Another night, there was a closing of the movie with honors, which also included Patrick Dempsey and Maura Kelly and Brendan Fraser. This is up in the green room at the House of Blues. This is Brendan Fraser, who was also in the movie doing his best mummy pose. This is a couple of years after the mummy, and I'm still trying to figure out what the clarinet was for. I do not remember if he played or if it was just left there, up in the green room. Still haven't figured that one out. And then I'm sharing this one because I really find this interesting. Otis Rush was the performer at the House of Blues that night, blues legend as well. And the woman, Susan Tedeschi, over the last 20 years, she's had a career that has just been amazing. She's part of the Tedeschi Trucks band. They are internationally known. I think she's living, I know she's living down south, I'm not sure where, but this was one of the first times I had met her, and I worked with her numerous times over the years. But at this point, she'd only been in the business maybe 2 or 3 years, and she was so excited to get this autograph. I remember it. And then I did work with her many times. Here's one of her with Bruce Hornsby. This is in a dressing room inside the Hat Shell once again. And I have been lucky. I have photographed the 4th of July there too, and been right beside the cannons when they were going off. I've been very lucky with where I've been able to go with my camera. So Susan has been fabulous to all the people that started with her here. And I've heard this from numerous people, and my experience is the same. When she came to Boston and she was doing a show at the Orpheum, I got the word out to her that I was interested in coming to the show and photographing. And I had full access there as well. And this is one of my favorite shots of Susan. Now we're going to go across town to another club, and this is Mamakin. Mamakin was a short-lived club in Boston, and I'll read a little bit from the chapter. This is called "Do What the Boss Says." Launched by Aerosmith and the Lions Group on December 23rd, 1994, and named after one of the band's earlier hit songs, Mamakin was one of Boston's hottest clubs by the time I was contracted to shoot a VIP party on October 22nd, 1995. It was to be a star-studded event featuring a performance by the band Neurotic Outsiders, who didn't perform often, which was a supergroup that featured Billy Idol, Duff McKagan and Matt Sorum of Guns N' Roses, John Taylor from Duran Duran, and Steve Jones from the Sex Pistols. Among those turning out for the event were Steven Tyler, who was part owner in the club. Mamakin was partly owned, as I said, by Aerosmith and the Lions Group. Joe Perry, also of Aerosmith, Tom Hamilton too. Dan Aykroyd from the House of Blues was in town shooting Celtic Pride, but Dan worked, Patrick Lyons was involved with the House of Blues as well, so Dan knew him. And Led Zeppelin's frontman, Robert Plant. I also read in the paper that Jimmy Page showed up at some point in the night, but I never saw him and never got a picture, but I did okay. I arrived at the club and made my way past the line waiting to get in, gave my name to security and was checked off the list. Once inside, I stored my bag and was soon greeted by the GM. He gave me basic timing for the sound check and showtime, and then he gave me a very specific instruction. I still can't believe it. Keep all your equipment off and don't shoot anything on it until I tell you to. I certainly had been told in the past when I could or couldn't take photos involving celebrities, but this was the only time I was ever told to keep my equipment off completely and to keep my lens cap on. Not my place to argue, so I did what I was told. And I would change that if I had the opportunity again. Shortly after, the doors open for the VIPs and the room starts to fill. I'm standing along one wall when I look to my left and see Robert Plant enter the club from Led Zeppelin with a friend and start heading in my direction. I then see Steven Tyler crossing from my right with the GM to greet them. I'm getting extremely antsy because I can see the moment about to happen right in front of my eyes but have still not been given the okay to power up. Tyler and Plant meet directly in front of me, greet each other. Then Tyler puts his arm around Plant and says to me, "Take a shot." Of course, I reach up to turn on the flash. I reach down to turn on the camera and the battery. I go to take the lens cap off, but not fast enough. Tyler looks at me and says, "A real pro," with a chuckle. Oh, that hurt. And turns back to the conversation. I was then told it was okay to start shooting. And this is the shot I got. Now, my wife wouldn't let me put this in the book. She said it doesn't do anything, but it's one of my favorites. It just kind of says everything. So on the left here, you have the back of Steven Tyler, and on the right, you have the back of Robert Plant. And they were along the wall, so I kind of worked my way around, and I did get a decent shot of Tyler, and not too bad of Robert Plant, but not the shot that I wanted. And after that, I followed Tyler around a little bit, and here he is with Dan Aykroyd. Now, these guys, they weren't performing; they were just there to have fun that night, and they really did. Tyler was funny and loose, as was Aykroyd. And then I was told by the club manager that Joe Perry from the band was coming in, so I made my way back outside again and grabbed shots of Joe. On my way back in, I was heading to they were about to do their sound check and also a rehearsal, because as I said, these guys didn't get together often. So here's Duff McKagan of Guns N' Roses just before they started playing. I'll just show you some of this is from the sound check. You have Steve Jones and John Taylor. I really like this shot. You have Matt Sorum on the drums back here. Here's Duff McKagan again. And if you look right here in the back, I don't think anybody else saw him except me, is Billy Idol just entering to join them. One of my favorites of Steve Jones, really fun shot. And then Billy came up and they talked about what songs they were going to do. And this is my favorite shot of a 30-year career. There is no shot that I care more about than this shot of Billy Idol. Maybe it has to do with the evening, the time, but it's a black and white, which is one of my favorites. And everything about it, the leather and the jacket, the hair, it's just one of my favorite shots. And here are the Neurotic Outsiders as they're getting ready to do their set. And then once they were done, they started hanging around and we started getting all sorts of wonderful shots. So you see John Taylor, Matt Sorum, Billy Idol, Tom Hamilton of Aerosmith joined them, and Duff McKagan. And I'll just break the story for a second, a very interesting story about Tom Hamilton. I've worked with Tom numerous times over the 30 years. That was probably around the third or fourth time that I had met him. It was at a KISS concert backstage. And I knew at this point, because my son had been friends with this boy from school, that Tom Hamilton grew up in Wayland, our town, and he actually grew up on Three Ponds Road in the house of my son's friend. So when I knew this and I ended up backstage with Tom Hamilton, I told him this and I said, "You want to have some fun?" He goes, "Sure." He was game. So I called up my friends and this was the time of answering machines. So he left a voice message on their machine and he basically said, "Hi, this is Tom Hamilton of Aerosmith. I used to live in your house and I've been thinking that I'd like to repurchase the property. So I'll be getting back in touch with you again, or you could talk to, or I think he gave the number as well." And he hung up. And it was probably a week or two later that I finally spoke to my friends. I said, "Did you guys get a call recently?" And the mother, Sharon, said, "Yes, we did." I said, "Was it Tom Hamilton?" She said, "How'd you know?" And I told her the story. I said, "What happened with the voice message?" She thought it was a joke. So before anyone else in the family could hear it, she erased it. So the best story is that the rest of the family never heard what he had said, which I just think is so hysterical. We still laugh about it. This one I kept in here, same guys, but Duff McKagan is smoking inside a building, a nightclub. This does not happen anymore. This is one of my favorite shots of Billy with Matt. Billy is a great guy. He was funny, entertaining, game for any photo. This is same room, Stephen with his first wife, Teresa. She was really lovely. And then my favorite shot of the whole night is this group photo. You have 5 different bands represented in this photo, and just a ton of history. So now I would like to change gears, literally, because this shoot was held on an MBTA car. It's held on a Green Line car, leaving out of Boston College in conjunction with Verizon. Can you believe Yellow Pages? When was the last time you heard the name Yellow Pages? And WMJX. So here's Joyce Kulhawick, Channel 4 newscaster. Probably most of you would know who she is. She was doing a live remote, and then from the radio station doing the introductions was Candy O'Terry. And I worked with Candy for years, and Gay as well. Gay Vern from Vernon, WMJX. I shot the exceptional women's lunches for many years. And then you have Jewel coming out from behind a plastic on the backside of a Green Line car. Absolutely the craziest place that I've ever photographed someone playing music. And we were on the train, and the train's going, and I have a lot of blurry photos from that day. You know, your above ground Green Line tracks are not the smoothest to ride. And you can tell by her face that it was amusing to her as well. She was really cool. And she did, it was more than a set, because we ended up going all the way into South Station, where at the end of the line, well, here's the crowd. This is looking back into the train, and people were all the way into the very back. They piped in the music, but it was just such a crazy scene. And here we are getting off. You know what? I don't know the answer. The question was, why the MBTA? I do not know. But mine was not to question. I was just to take the photos. And then at South Station, they had a cake presentation. This is the general manager of the radio station, and Candy, and of course, Jewel in the center. So we're going to move on to, this was the All-Star hockey game. And the reason that I include this is because I was working for 3 days with Peter Max, the famous, world famous, iconic painter from New York. He had done the poster for the All-Star game. He has done posters, many of you will know, for the Olympics, for the basketball finals, Super Bowls. He's also known very well for his colors and his palettes. And he was just an amazing person to work with. And I'm going to read a little bit more from this book. And the last chapter was, you know, don't shoot until I tell you to. The title of this one is Shoot Until I Say Stop. So I'm going to explain how he and I had met for the first time. It was a 3-day event that I was shooting with him, and this was the first one. We all first met up Thursday night at the Fantasy Experience, which is the pass that I just showed you, being held at the World Trade Center on the waterfront. Peter had a huge convention space set up with a banner reading "Art of the Coolest Game" over the front. The space was filled from floor to ceiling with framed artwork of various sizes depicting different aspects of hockey. He also carried some recognizable pieces, such as the Statue of Liberty, Donald Duck, and Snow White. These are all done in the colors that he is known for and world famous. There were also painted and signed hockey sticks, pucks, and really amazing goalie masks for sale. To complete the vibe, some of the staff dressed as referees. I arrived early, as I usually did, to let my client know I was on site, store my gear, and check things out. I started taking setup shots of the booth and all the great pieces when I spotted Peter coming down the hall with his group. He looked very pleased as he approached the booth and saw the result of the hard work of his staff. After he looked around a while, I was introduced to him as his photographer, which, let me tell you, that was an introduction that I'll never forget. And I remember thinking that he reminded me of my grandfather. Later, he was pulled away for some photo ops and video ops, and this is one of them, as well as with the press, as well as videographers from the NHL. I'm standing off to the side, getting shots of the interviews, waiting for Peter to head over to the table at the front of the booth, filled with the posters he had designed for the All-Star game. And here he is pre-signing some of them. When he's done, he thanks the crew and is being directed to the signing table, but stops and motions to me to come over. He pulls me aside and says, "I want you to do something for me." I said, "Sure, Peter, what do you need?" He says, "I want you to get on a chair about 4 or 5 feet in front of me and shoot down on me and the posters while I'm signing." I said, "Sure." And then he added, "And just keep shooting until I say stop." Since I typically would only take about half a dozen photos from one location, I asked about how many shots he wanted. His answer was a bit puzzling because he responded, "I don't really care about the shots. I just want you to fire off the flash about every 10 seconds. Then when he saw the confusion on my face, he added with a smile, "Just keep firing it off and watch what happens." I said, "Sure, Peter, you're the boss." As the signing began, there were 4 or 5 people there already waiting to get posters or autographs. They were informed that the poster alone was one price, but if they wanted Peter to sign it and in custom embellish them, there would be an additional charge. I pull over a chair as he asked me to and climb up as people start coming around. I have about a dozen shots left on the roll, so I fire those off. And as people leave with their signed posters, more people take their place. Peter is signing and embellishing, talking and laughing, and every 10 seconds or so, I'm firing off the camera. No film at this point, it's empty, just the flash. Attracted by all the commotion at our booth, people came from all directions. I guess that because of his request, Peter sold an additional 50 to 100 posters in a very short period of time, with most of them being of the signed and embellished, more expensive variety. When it was done, I waited until we had a quiet moment, went over to him and said, "That was brilliant." He just smiled, and I do have a vague recollection that he patted me on the back as well, as if to say, that's what it was all about. He was the ultimate showman, and for the 3 days that I was with him, I was never not impressed by him and his salesmanship or how he connected with people. And I say to this day, wherever Peter was the party. So we had another event. We parted ways at this event, but on my way out, and again, because I had this all access pass, I stopped at another booth and got 2 of my favorites. I grew up in Montreal, so I grew up watching hockey, and these 2 names have been synonymous with greatness in hockey: Mark Messier and the great one himself, Wayne Gretzky. So the next day, there was a celebrity skate, a fundraiser, and Peter was going to be involved, not on skates, mind you, but with one of his posters. So here we're in the dressing room, and I was able to get some really fun shots. This is Senator John Kerry, and I will tell you that Kerry skates really well, plays hockey okay, and I've seen him do numerous celebrity skates like this. He's really made himself available. And here you have Jason Priestley and Jamie Walters, both from 90210 fame. This is a fun shot from that night as well. You may recognize Neal McDonough. He is a world-renowned movie star now. He wasn't at the time. He had just done a few pieces. And on the right, he's with Mike Eruzione, who was the goalie for the Miracle on Ice, the 1980 Olympic gold medal USA winning team. Then also that night, and this was really funny, Richard Dean Anderson, who played MacGyver, he was there, and he was kind of egging on Matthew Perry from Friends, who kept saying he wanted to ride the Zamboni. And being Matthew Perry, and being that it was an NBC rink, he got his wish. And obviously it turned into a photo op. So he got on there and he's riding around, and Richard Dean Anderson is saying, let's go. So the fact is that he took it for a spin. He didn't want to get off, and he had the press chasing him around. You can see that he's making passes. So that was the way that event ended up. And they really did chase him down. So now I want to move on to another story. This is Rick Fox of the Celtics standing on a dance floor at the Palace at Route 1 in Saugus, inside a bubble machine. This was something new that the club had brought in, and it was the first time that I had worked at the Palace. Again, this was a shot for the newspaper. Sorry about that. I did not work at the Palace for many years after that, but I did hook up again with them through a PR firm. And the first time I was there did not go so well. Certainly not what I expected. And the story is about this performer. His name is Nelly, and Nelly was known to wear a Band-Aid at this point. He used to wear a Band-Aid on his cheek in solidarity with a friend of his that was in prison. And this shot was not supposed to happen. A shot of Nelly without the Band-Aid while he was out was really not supposed to have happened. But I was told by my boss at the Palace, you need to get a shot of him. And for most of the night, he did not come out, and we did not see him. So the story is like this, and I kind of mentioned it at the beginning, and nobody has called me on it. At the beginning of the book, when I'm doing my thank yous, I say, and I want to specifically thank Scott Farmland for literally saving my butt one night at the Palace in Saugus. And this is the story. I had my digital camera. I was no longer film, but I was not very comfortable, so I only took it out a few times at that point. And I had a 200mm lens, which is a good zoom lens. And I'm waiting and waiting, and Nelly doesn't come out. And he doesn't come out. The night's getting long. I'm supposed to get a shot. Finally, he comes out, and I just say, nobody's told me anything. I'm taking my shot. I fired off 4 shots and immediately was grabbed by my neck strap and by my shirt, literally being dragged by a gentleman who was his security, probably was about 6'4", 6'5", 330, somewhere around there. And he had me on my toes as he was literally strangling me, bringing me to the stairs going up where they had security. Scott Farmland saw what was going on, jumped on the guy's arm, and Scott was not a small guy. I'd say he was probably 210, 215. And this guy, he was pulling both of us over to security, and I'm really having trouble breathing. But I know that if I don't do something, we're going to have more of a problem when we get to security. So I popped open the camera and I grabbed my files, my card, dropped it in my pocket, closed up the camera. Scott saw this, so he knew what I had done. We got to their head of security at the bottom of the stairs, and now there's all this screaming. His security is saying, this guy took a picture of Nelly, he took a picture without the band, screaming at their security because the music is going. Scott is saying, he didn't do anything, he didn't do anything. And I'm lying through my teeth saying, I never took a picture, I never took a picture. And I turned the camera around and turned it on and showed them there's nothing there because the card wasn't there. Their security realized at this point they couldn't do anything more about it without it being a problem at the club. And they let me go. But I will tell you that I was shook from that experience. And I went directly to the club manager. I said, I want security going to my car. It's the first and only time that I ever felt that it was necessary to have security to get to my car. But that was the worst experience there. But I did have some really good shoots there as well. This is hip hop artist Lil Kim. Kimberly Locke, who was a 3rd runner-up on American Idol and has a fabulous career going right now. And Usher. Usher was the best. He was great to everybody. He was, they all come, basically they would do shows in Boston, either the Garden or the Pavilion, and then for their after parties come to the Palace where they were treated really, really well. They had exclusive access to the VIP areas for them and their entourages. And this is another one of Usher showing that he really is as relaxed as you would think he is. For my last story, what I'd like to talk about is one of my favorite clients, and that's Kiss 108. I worked for Kiss 108 for 11 years, and then I did some other sporadic stuff, but for 11 years, I shot the Kiss concert. And the Kiss concert is, as I said in the book, the behemoth of summer concerts. It's the biggest one that I shot every year, and I prepared weeks in advance. There were photos that needed to be done in advance. There were also all the logistics of where I needed to be with my assistant at different times during the day for autograph sessions, meet and greets, backstage photographs, as well as stage photographs, parking lot photographs, and up on the grass. It was the longest day of the year for me. It was pretty much a 12-hour day. And I loved every minute of it. It didn't matter if it was hot, raining, I had a blast. And every year they had between 20 and 35 performers. So figure 11 passes, that's at least 200 celebrities that I got to photograph just through Kiss 108. Cher, Tom Jones, Carly Simon, Rod Stewart, all of these people went through there. But I want to focus on this one right here. This is June 1st, 2002. That was Kiss Concert 23. So just to kind of set it up, the names again were just amazing of the performers. And many of them were really young and right at the start of their careers. 2002, think about it, it's 22 years ago. 20 years ago, Alicia Keys was starting out. She hadn't even hit her stride yet. Avril Lavigne was the same. It was within the first 2 years of her name being synonymous with, pop music. Michelle Branch, at this point, I think had a year or two on Avril, but again, great sets. It was just her at a piano as well, a lot of fun. And Celine Dion. So the performers that you have here were just amazing. And that doesn't even include the next two who I just had so much fun photographing. The first one is Shakira. And again, this is, 20 years ago, start of her career. It was a wonderful set. And she was just great to photograph. When every time you fire the camera, you're getting something like this, it's exciting to shoot. And this is my favorite shot of her. They drop down confetti at the end of the set. And I like the way this just kind of worked out. And then for me, because I was a huge fan, was No Doubt. They were topping the charts at this point. And Gwen Stefani is one of the most dynamic performers I've ever photographed. A couple of others are Peter Wolf of the Jay Giles Band. He was just incredible. He's all over the stage. He actually did 2 Kiss concerts and jumped into the audience and played with them. It was just wonderful. So Gwen, again, poses left and right, power poses, and you really almost couldn't get a bad shot. She interacted with the fans, with the band. And one of my favorites of her set. On the men's side, the big act of the day for the demographic for this concert is younger women, and Aaron Carter was one of the big names, and his brother is Nick Carter of the Backstreet Boys, and he was there that night as well. So Aaron started out and did his set, and after about a song or two, Nick came out from behind the curtain, and the crowd went nuts. I mean, the volume just jumped. They did their set, and then after their set, they stayed on stage and they went off and came back. They presented the 2 checks to the Genesis Fund, which Kiss did every year. And then they also did an interview with Billy Costa from the station. So now I'm going to read because this really was a wonderful day. I had done my shots here and it was time for me to back away from the stage and start taking care of some other business. So I have the shots I need and I have other places to be. So I started making my way towards the aisle. And that's when I see this adorable little girl a few rows back staring at the stage and wearing an Aaron Carter t-shirt with the words Aaron written down one arm and Carter written down the other, like fake tattoos. And she was having a real moment. She couldn't get to the stage because of all the big girls that were there. And this moment was, well, we'll get back to that in a second. The moment that she had was red face, tears, the whole works. And I do have one out of order, so we're gonna go to it. And this is the girl. Her name was Caroline Johnson. And this was literally shot a minute or two after Aaron and Nick had just performed. So at this point, I started thinking about when I saw her, I said, understandable that she was like this because she'd just seen her rock star crush in person. At this point, I started thinking about the older of my young sons who was 6 and how he would be if he met one of his heroes. And I decided at this point that I wanted to do something special for her. So I followed her to her seat as she headed to her seat about 15 rows back to sit with a woman who I would later discover was her Aunt Val, who put her arms around her trying to console her. I went up to the woman, introduced myself, and told her I was working with KISS 108, and I had all the badges. And I handed her my card. I asked her to send me her address, and I would mail the little girl a photo of Aaron that nobody else in the whole world would have except me and the radio station. She smiled, told me the girl's name was Caroline, and said thank you. With that, I was on my way. I roam around the venue for another half hour or so until it's time for me to head over to the Strawberries Records and Tapes tent, where there's a meet and greet with Aaron and Nick, who will gladly sign your newly purchased CD. I get over to the tent, and there has to be about 200 girls in line behind metal barriers holding up their CDs. And it was loud, let me tell you. Every time I picked up the camera, the volume doubled. While I'm standing with Aaron and Nick at the front at their table, taking photos and looking around, off to the right and halfway up a set of stairs, I see that same woman with the little girl that I had talked to earlier. I was still feeling her energy when I had an idea to make this day totally unforgettable. I made my way over near where they were standing and reintroduced myself. And I will tell you that for all the time that I was at KISS, I always got 2 tickets for me and my assistant when we were going in, but we never needed the tickets. It was just something crazy about the way they needed us to come in the venue. So we had 2 tickets, and typically within the first few hours of walking around up all the way to the back of the venue, the very last row, either I or my assistant would find a mom and a child, a dad and a child, two kids that looked like they had just spent, all their babysitting money to go to the show, and we would go over and upgrade them. And I have to tell you, it was more fun for me than it was for them every time. So to continue, I made my way over to where they were standing and reintroduced myself. I looked at the aunt, pointed behind me to where Aaron and Nick were signing, and asked, "Would you trust me with your niece?" I knew she understood what I meant, and because she would be able to see me the whole time from where she was standing, she said yes. I said, "Great, then give me a hand." Since I was on the inside of the barrier, Valerie and I both lifted Caroline over to where I was. I offered her my hand, which she took, and the 2 of us walked past all the big girls with their CDs. I walked her right up and around the table where Aaron and Nick were signing, and I said, "Aaron, do you have a second?" Because I had already been friends with them now. I'd been doing photos for a while. "I'd like to introduce you to Caroline. Caroline, this is Aaron." She didn't say a word. She couldn't say a word. I'd seen this reaction before from other people, so I just asked Aaron if we could do a photo. He said, "Sure." And with that, he scooped her up in his arms, and I started shooting. He then put her down, but before we could leave, Nick, who had been watching us, his brother from Backstreet Boys, he wanted in on this and came over to Caroline and asked her if he could sign her shirt. She didn't say a word, just nodded her head yes. Nick then not only signed her shirt, but was happy to pose for a photo as well. At this point, she must be in shock, but all smiles when I say, "Are you ready to go back?" She nods. I don't think she said a word to me the whole time. I take her hand, and again, we make the return trip to Aunt Val, who's a wonderful lady, past all those other big girls. Less than a week later, I mailed out some wonderful photos to them, and a few days after that, I received letters from both of them in the mail that are in the book, but I won't share them at this moment. But that typically would be the end of the story, but there really is a PS. And I'll just read again. While doing research for this book and contacting old colleagues to get more info on some of the stories, I contacted both Valerie, who had been following me online since the concert for years, and Caroline to make sure that I got all my facts right. They both confirmed my details, but also told me, as some of you will remember, the rest of the story. Following the concert, Caroline, as any 9-year-old would do, was telling everyone at school that she met Aaron and Nick Carter and about what happened and was getting photos to prove it. Of course, kids being kids, nobody believed her and gave her a really hard time, like a really hard time. There were only a few days left at school that year when Valerie received my package of proofs. Knowing that Caroline was dying for the photos, she overnighted them, and they arrived the very night before school was supposed to end for the summer. Caroline walked into school on the last day of the school year with her proof and was proudly showing the photos to anyone who wanted to see. And that was everybody. To say she was queen bee that day would be an understatement. And I'm happy to share that little 9-year-old girl, now 20 years later, is now all grown up, plays and writes music, sings in a band, and has some real tattoos now. She has a wonderful spirit, works with autistic children, and does music therapy. The three of us agree that this is one of the favorite stories of our entire lives, one that we've all thought about often and will always have as a wonderful shared memory. And as I said at the beginning of the chapter, it's nice to have friends. With that, I'm going to wrap up, and I want to thank you both live in person and on Zoom for sharing some time. I hope you saw some photos that interested you, and my book is available on allandinesphotography.com. I will sign it and personalize it to you if you'd like to hear the rest of the stories. I think we're good.
Thank you so much. You guys, if you have
Any questions?
I can also
See
see it
if there's-
Zoom.
That'd be great.
Not on Zoom. How did you start doing photo? Oh, did you have a question? I'm sorry. No,
That's
no, no,
okay.
go ahead.
No. I was just curious, you've done this over many decades.
Yes.
And what were the biggest adjustments you had to make in you doing your photos? With security, what were the biggest things that you had to?
Learning the equipment. The hardest thing that I ever did was switching from film to digital. It was a very, very difficult learning curve. I wasn't working with the press, so I never had anybody to talk to. I know that all the people that I've talked to that were at press, they used to sit down with the cameras, go through the menus, talk to each other, what works, what doesn't. That was really hard for me. Getting into venues, that was easy. I had an attitude of, by the third year of shooting, I was shooting for most of the radio stations in the city, from Oldies, ROR, Magic, Jammin'. I had shot for WCVB TV. I've worked for Channel 4, and I was older. I was not a 20-year-old starting out with a camera. I was 30 years old, and it made a difference. It really made a difference to talk to people, and they look at me with the camera and they see somebody their own age, and they know that if I started with film, that I had some talent to be doing what I was doing. Most of the time I was just faking it. Seriously. There were a lot of photos that ended up in the trash in those days.
Do you have a version of this where it's, well, of like digital photos?
Yeah.
Like, have you shot out in clubs at all?
With digital? Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I've done full concerts with digital, and what's really nice is the editing is I don't have to let a photo go out that I don't like, and there's so many ways to fix them. As an example, I've done group photos of 100 people, let's say at the House of Blues, something like that, for their holiday parties. And there's no way you're getting 100 people with their eyes open. Most of them you can't even see. But with digital, there are many photos, because I'm not shooting press, and I wasn't worried about the authenticity of the photo so much, where I would manipulate it. I could bring in 4 or 5 photos, faces from other photos, just because, you shoot 5, 6, 7 in a row. So everybody's pretty close to where they are in each photo. And I've moved faces so well that you'd never know that it happened. Oh, yeah.
Who is your besides Caroline? That seems like one of your favorites, but
Oh,
who
yeah.
is like your top person that you photographed, like the nicest person or favorite person to photograph?
James Taylor.
Oh,
Absolutely, James Taylor. I was lucky enough to photograph him a couple of times, but the luckiest was when he was doing a listener event at, I forget which station, I think it was MJX as well. And for about 10 minutes, I was sitting in the recording booth, just me and James. I was sitting on my knees. He was 5 feet, 4 feet away, and I'm looking at him with his guitar and the camera. And I say in the book, I didn't know it was possible for knees to shake while you're sitting on the ground, but they most certainly did. I had been listening to him since I was 11 years old, slow dancing to his music at 12. So and that was one of my favorite experiences for sure.
So what do you want to do now? I mean, you had your,
You know, the question has been asked, is there somebody that I would like to have shot that I haven't? And there is, and it's Mick Jagger and the Rolling Stones, but I wouldn't want to shoot them now. The shot that I would have wanted would be when I started shooting in the early 90s, to have early shots of Mick Jagger. That would have been fun. Yeah, that would have been all right.
I see that your book has a foreword by Carter Allen.
Yeah.
Are you friends with?
I'm good friends with Carter. As a matter of fact, I didn't talk about it tonight, but I met Carter Allen at my very first shoot at the House of Blues. He was the MC for that Stevie Ray Vaughan event. So I have photos of Carter from the day that we met, which is pretty neat. Then I worked with him through the other station, through BCN as well. I think did we do BCN, or that may have been Charles, but Carter and I have done presentations together. He's a wonderful, wonderful guy, and absolutely an encyclopedia of rock and roll music knowledge. And he has books out as well, and they're just wonderful about BCN and about he wrote about U2, and he's a very good friend. I can't wait to do another presentation with him.
Maybe you can do it here. Yeah.
We can certainly talk. He's ready to do it. He said he's going out on vacation for a while. He said when he gets back, he's ready to do another one, because when he and I sit down, either with or without photos, we have so much fun.
Well, do you have any other questions?
yeah, we're good.
Well, thank you so much, Alan.
Thank you.
And thank you everyone for coming on Zoom and in person.
Thank you very much.